So hello, today I'm going to be joined by my friends Luke and Lee, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be ranking what we think the best card in the core set for Smash Up is. As you can see on the screen, what I've done is taken two cards from each of the core set factions, and I've randomly assigned them a pairing in the tournament structure, and we're going to be pairing them off until we get to the best card in the game, in the core set of the game. What does best card mean? It's going to be a very subjective list. I'm sure it's something that we're going to be discussing as we go through. But without further ado, I'll just ask Luke and Lee to introduce themselves. I mean, why don't you say maybe how long you've been playing Smash Up for and what your favourite faction is? Luke?
So you introduced me to Smash Up. We used to play competitive Pokemon together, but you have to keep buying the cards and building the deck. It was quite expensive. So you showed this game to me where you own all the cards. You can all turn up and just pick whichever you want. Still quite expensive, but yes. Anyone can turn up and just pick up a faction and mesh them together. So I've been playing 4 years now. I love collecting stuff as well, so this really speaks to me. My favourite faction is probably the Mad Scientists. Adding the extra damage counters, just really trying to find a way to put a lot of counters on a first mate, or pairing them with Greeks or shapeshifters, and just trying to really build a 20-point minion, something that just becomes unstoppable.
Yeah,
that's the game. I do also like Giant Ants Pirates to try and get that combo going with the first mate where he just breaks all the bases using the Titan, but we don't really play that in our friendship circle anymore.
Yeah, we've banned a few of those since you started playing, Luke. Thanks for that.
It upsets a lot of people.
I know what you mean, though. It's straight out of the box, isn't it, Smash Up? You don't have to, like, Pokemon's great. You get some of the same kind of feeling of playing the Pokemon trading card game, but you don't have to keep on buying new expansions as they come out, or new cards as they come out to keep changing decks, and stuff doesn't rotate out of format, so it's a cheaper game than Pokemon, that's for sure. Lee?
Absolutely.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having us in. I bet it's weird calling me Lee. I don't think you've ever called me Lee in your life. Actually, it's an unusual way to go. Yeah, I've known Luke for a lot longer than I've known Mark, and it was Luke that got me into Smash Up sort of as a direct relationship. Me and Luke play quite competitive fantasy American football now that we've got too old to actually play the real sport. So we were looking for a hole to fill the void after the season had finished, and this seemed to be the absolute perfect thing, and became a big staple of our board game night. So. Yeah, it's one of them classics that you just reach for every time there's any chance to get it out of the box, really. Prefer to play with 4 or 2, 3. I feel a little bit ganged up on sometimes. I'm sure we'll get around to that later on. But in terms of favourite factions, I'm a traditionalist. I'm a zombies guy through and through. I absolutely love that faction. Paired with ghosts is probably my favourite way to go. If I ever get a chance to pull a zombie ghost combo out of the box, I'm absolutely all over that. Playing from the graveyard, it's sneaky, it's underhand, it requires a bit of forward thinking, and it's waiting for that massive boom play. It doesn't take a lot of building up a minion and moving it around. That's not really my play style. I like to hoard everything to death and then throw it all at you in one big go. And I absolutely love the fact that the ghosts and the zombies get to do that.
So you're going to be batting for the zombies in this tournament, then?
Absolutely.
I'm probably still going to call you Tank at some point during this video as well. So
just feel free to do so. Yeah, I don't really know anybody that calls me Lee. It's quite weird, actually. This is my work iPad, so I have to have formal name on.
Did your wife call you Lee?
Actually, yeah. Well,
when you're in trouble.
Let's not go down that rabbit.
No, let's not go down that. Let's not open that can of worms.
All right, so let's dive straight into the first matchup then. So no easy pairings in this first round, or no easy pairings at all. We've got First Mate against Tenacious Z. I don't know if you can you both see that on the screen? Is it clear?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So who wants to kick us off here then? Who reckons First Mate or Tenacious Z?
Well, I think what's going to happen here is I'm going to lobby hard for one, Lee's going to lobby hard for another, and you're going to be the deciding vote.
All right, let's hear it then.
If I can go first,
yeah,
I don't really think there's many better cards in the game than First Mate. And I know that's a bold statement for the opening draw, but it is the sole card in that deck, in the Pirates faction, that you really want out at all times. It's very, very problematic for everyone you play against. And there's so many combinations that involve the first mate that can win you the game, can break the game. The Pirates Giant Ants combination, just stacking with power counters and then break as many bases as you can. There is nothing that strikes fear into your opponent than that, in my opinion. It stays on the board. It's very difficult to remove. It puts a big target on its head to try and make everyone remove it. And it has so much power to just continually break bases, get involved, always adding you power, always getting you points. Now, the zombie, the Tenacious Z, it doesn't scare you in the same way because, and you don't even try and get rid of it because it's just going to come back out. Whereas the first mate puts a real target on its head. Everyone wants to get rid of it because they know how problematic it can be.
I mean, I completely agree. It's the highest priority. As soon as you play first mate, your opponents all want to get rid of it. It's definitely a high priority target for all destruction, removal, anything like that. Lee, I presume you're going to back Tenacious Z.
I couldn't agree more. It's really funny. It's a great first combo to talk about because the Z never goes away, but the strength of the zombies is in the horde. It's not in the single play. So individually, it's weak, but in its group, it's very strong because the fact is you've got a 6-power minion if you've got all 3 Zs, and they're just going to keep coming for you. But you're absolutely right. Card for card, the best card in this pair is first mate, and I'm not arguing with that.
Really? Wow. I'm surprised.
I'm surprised too.
Z's great. Z is absolutely great, and it's my play style. It's sneaky, it's underhand, and it keeps coming for you from the graveyard. You like I say, you just keep racking it up turn after turn, and it never ever goes away. It's an extra 2 power every single turn. It's a great power boost. It's absolutely wonderful for popping a base as a sneaky sort of last second extra jump on, or starting something off on a different base, or spreading itself around, or as an extra play when you get out the king minion in the zombies. It's always there. It's always playable. You just got to search for it in your deck, and like you say, it never ever goes away. So as a collective, as a horde, it's a wonderful card, and it fits very well in its faction. But as card for card, the best play there is first mate. Hands down. Just like you say, you load up that card and you scare everyone. And it's not so bad if you play like a destructive, get a decent destructive faction, and you're able to get rid of that. But within the initial deck, there's really only ninjas and pirates that you can use to counter ninjas or pirates. So you have to have some sort of bombardier, you have to have some sort of combo that's going to eventually get that card off the deck. And as soon as you start to power it up, there is very little you can ever do to it. And aliens perhaps to pick that up or something. So I'm not arguing. It's really interesting that you thought I would have done. Faction for faction, I'd vouch zombies over pirates all day. But I think that is literally one of the only cards in pirates, whereas Z is probably one of the weaker cards in the zombies. So,
wow. Well, I mean, I'm going to disagree with both of you. To be honest, I think Tenacious Z is the better card of these two. The reason I think it's the better card is that First Mate is just a 2-power sticky minion, and it needs another faction to make First Mate good. Whereas Tenacious Z is good by itself. It doesn't need anything else for it to be a good card. As soon as you've got your first Z in play, that's it. Unless they've got some way of shuffling it back in, or returning it to hand is not great for you, but you can just play it again immediately. But it's so sticky. So Tenacious Z, once it's in play, that's it. It's always going to keep coming back into play. It's just a solid 2-power minion, and it's always good. So it's independently good. It doesn't need anything else. Whereas I think First Mate, great, if you've got 4 of them out, it's 8-power moving from base to base, but that's not brilliant for 4 cards. And it's very vulnerable to common destruction effects. And once a First Mate's gone, obviously it's gone. Pirates don't have good draw or anything. So I'm going to say, for me, Tenacious Z is the better card of these two, just because it's independently good. It doesn't need anything else. Whereas I think First Mate, First Mate's great. It's a great card, but it needs that, Giant Ants. It needs the Mad Scientists. It needs the Cyborg Apes to really make the First Mate a broken card.
And I agree, except I think the strength in the first mate is its ability paired with another faction. So the fact that, first mate is so good because of the fact that it compares so well with so many other factions. Whereas Z is very much a standalone card. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the Z, but I think that the first mate brings more to the table because of how well it pairs with the other faction, pretty much any other faction that it can go with.
Okay,
Yeah, if you're
I'll
not
give you that.
picking, if you're not picking your extra faction based on what can I do to make this first mate unstoppable, I don't think you're playing the pirates right.
I agree.
The other
I agree with that.
destruction cards tend to just get in the way. I want them out of my hands. I don't really want. I'm not that bothered about destroying stuff necessarily, especially in a 3 or 4 player game. It's very hard to pick one person and destroy them and have a real game. So I'm looking for actions to put on the first mate. I'm picking my combination, my mad scientists, Greeks, anything that you can do to put extra counters. Extra sharks is a good one. You can make a first mate with werewolves as well, putting stuff so you can't destroy it, you can't get rid of it. It's adding counters. If you don't pick your complementary faction based on what you can do to the first mate, I don't think you're playing pirates right.
Okay, I get you. What you're saying basically is first mate is such a good card in the game that it determines it's one of those cards you base your combo around, essentially. It's that good. It's one of the things.
And I think that's why I like it so much, because it is one of a kind. There is very little else I can think of off the top of my head that you play in the same way that you play a first mate. Whereas Z, as great as it is just graveyard fodder that you want to kill to keep bringing back from the dead. Which is great, because it's a 2 power every single turn for as long as you've got them in the graveyard, and I love that. But I think the first mate's the slow burner, but is the overall better card as a result of that.
I think I can't disagree. However, for me, of these two, I would pick Tenacious Z, just because, as I say, independently strong, doesn't need anything else, not reliant on anything else. But shall we take it to a vote? I think enough choice.
If you said that Z was the best card, I wouldn't. I'm lobbying for first mate because I think first mate is better. But if you told me that you think Z is better and that was the one going through, I wouldn't disagree or argue with you much beyond that, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I mean, you guys both think it's first mate, so we'll put first mate through. Okay, we'll go with that.
Rightly so.
It's a democracy. I didn't realise.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Democracy just simply doesn't work.
Hey, that guy will come back out somehow anyway. He'll come back into the final somehow, Z. He'll get himself out of the scrap heap.
He'll just play himself out the death pile.
Okay, so let's move on to pairing number 2. I think this one may be a little bit easier than the first round pairing. So we've got Rampage up against Full Sail. So Rampage, the dinosaur combo wombo card, and Full Sail, the pirate combo wombo card. So the 2 combo wombos coming out here. So I think possibly know where this is going, but Lee, do you want to start this time on this one?
Yeah, I'm happy to start this one. Again, it's difficult to judge these 2 cards independently, and I think based on what you were trying to say for Z in the last round, I think that's what I'm going to try to do. Objectively, I'm going to try to look at both of these cards as their individual, and I think if that's what I do, and I'm just looking at both of these cards as their individual, I think it's got to be Full Sail. There's very little in the way of a comparison between Full Sail and Rampage. However, there are combinations that you can play with Rampage, and I think off the top of my head, Killer Plants comes to mind, where you're able to, or Killer Plants, and I believe it's Disco Dancers, where you can essentially fish this thing out of the discard pile several times over. And there's combos I could think of where actually I think Rampage would have a replayability, again, graveyard factioning I'm thinking about here, a replayability that makes it really quite strong. But I think given the choice of having either of these cards in my hand, I think it would be Full Sail. Primarily because, again, I like to play Swarm factions, so I like to have lots of minions in lots of different places, and that would usually mean, particularly if I'm able to block loot somehow, that I might be able to move all my minions over in one fell swoop and win a base. So I think Full Sail takes it for me, simply because of the special playability.
I mean, I can't disagree with that.
I agree. I think you might be having a different conversation if it didn't also have the special bit. I think that is the difference maker, because what it does is put you in control when you're going to move everybody. If it was just move everybody, you have to pick your moment. You're waiting on some other things to come out. You still got that special turn. I think you can almost wait till everything's concluded, everything looks like it's won, it's all done, and are you going to decide to that really big swing play where you take all the points, or you manage to disrupt somebody in some way so that it has a really big swing play for you. I do like Rampage, but I think it's very heavily dependent on King Rex being the recipient.
Yeah.
And if this was a standalone card, I think you'd often have it in your hand, looking to try and, okay, am I going to break the base with my 4 minion on it? There's a lot of 5-power minions you want to keep around. So doubling a 5, okay, yeah, that's fine, but you don't mind King Rex going because he doesn't add a talent or an ability to it. So I think that is too dependent on King Rex, whereas Full Sail just allows you a really big swing play.
Yeah, I mean,
Sounds like you're previewing one of the later cards there, Luke. No love for King Rex.
I mean, Rampage is good, but it needs a card above 5 power for Rampage to be really, really good.
Yeah.
And that's King Rex or a buffed up minion. And there's not enough factions that can really do that or make good use of Rampage. I mean, there is the great play from Smash Up All Stars where you go Ghostly Arrival, King Rex, Rampage for a 21 point base break by itself, which is obviously an amazing play. But as you say, Full Sail, it can be played in your normal turn, but it can also be played before a base scores, so it's just an unbelievably good card. How many times have you played a game where Full Sail was pretty much the last card you played in the game, and then you won by that point? You were like 4 or 5 points behind, and you managed to break a couple of bases with Full Sail, or just steal a few bases. Such a good card. So I can't disagree. For me, it has to be Full Sail.
Agree.
Okay.
Nice to have a unanimous one there.
Yeah, I like that too.
Well, it's going to pair the Pirates off against the Pirates in the next round.
Oh no, that's asking for trouble.
All right, so Full Sail. It's going through. So next up, we've got Tech Center and Mark of Sleep from the Tricksters. So who wants to kick this one off?
Why don't you go first on this one?
I like that. Yeah, go on, Mark.
I think for me, it has to be Mark of Sleep. I mean, primarily in this pairing, because if you play Mark of Sleep, you can't play Tech Center. So in this straight up matchup, it's just really, really good. But for me, Mark of Sleep blocks half of Smash Up. So Smash Up is obviously a game where you can get to play 1 action, 1 minion a turn. Actions are half the game. So if you can stop someone from playing actions on their turn, and it could be, you can choose when you want to play that, so it could be a really important turn of the game. It could be the turn where they might play Full Sail on you, for instance. Then that's just, unbelievably strong. That is such a strong power to have, even though it's time limited. And draw power, yeah, Tech Center is really good in the robots, but lots of factions have draw, and there's lots of good draw cards out there. So I don't think Tech Center is great, but it's not a special card for me, whereas Mark of Sleep, nothing has really come. There's been no similar cards to Mark of Sleep really since the core set, 1 or 2, but Mark of Sleep is just so standout, and it's so powerful, as I say, to be able to stop half the game, even just for a turn. Okay, it gets worse in 3 and 4 players, but for 2 players, that is very, very strong. So for me, I'd put Mark of Sleep through, even if it's just on this 1v1 pairing that Mark of Sleep just straight up beats Tech Center.
Interesting. You brought up the player count there. That's the issue here. In a 3 or 4 player game, I think you have to play more selfishly. You have to look, what can I do with my cards for myself? And in 2 player games, you've got loads of combinations that just open right up. And then slowing someone down, stopping someone doing anything is very, very important at that point of view. So I'm going to judge it based on the reality is probably the Tech Center is better in 3 player and 4 player. Mark of Sleep is really strong, and I do like it a lot. And in 2 player, great card, really great card. You're stopping the special plays, you're stopping all the actions. The time limit of it hurts it a little bit. you sort of putting someone behind a tiny amount. It depends what actions they have, but they've still got those cards in the hand. They can still play it the turn after. You might stop the full sale play, but really you're just delaying it. You're not eliminating it. Whereas Tech Center is just draw, and draw is always good. Whatever you're doing, you want more cards in your hand, and that for me is the better card.
Lee?
Ooh, my first opportunity to sink Luke before we go any further. Do you know, it's interesting listening to both arguments, because personally, I don't have a standout favourite out of these two. So when I sit to listen to both of your arguments, it's quite interesting. I thought after Mark had finished talking, I thought, yeah, it's definitely going to be Mark Sleep. And then Luke gave his rebuttal, and actually, I think, well, maybe Texan is actually the better one. Again, I'm kind of struggling to pick a favourite out of these two, but I think I'm probably going to go with, and I don't mean to do this on purpose, Luke, but I'm probably going to go with Mark of Sleep, purely because, if I'm honest, I like the ability to be able to shut down a faction's actions because of, well, again, I'm flip-flopping. I like the opportunity to be able to be that guy that gets to play that card to ruin somebody else's game a little bit. And I think that's what Mark of Sleep lets you do more than Tech Center does. And I appreciate what you're saying. It's better to play almost selfishly, but again, Tech Center, I think, well, to be fair, I was going to say you need a better pairing, but with robots, really, you don't, do you? Because you're probably going to have a lot of minions out on the board before you play something like Tech Center. And I do think that, again, that's part of your engine. You want that draw. You want to be able to keep things like Hoverbot and stuff coming out. So it's really beneficial to have the Tech Center.
I would be happy if Mark of Sleep. I wouldn't be sad if Mark of Sleep went through.
Do you know, I'm going to say, based on what Mark said, I'm going to say Mark of Sleep, but only because in the head-to-head Mark of Sleep versus Tech Center that Mark of Sleep wins. I don't think it's necessarily a better card. I just think in that situation, in this head-to-head, it is the better card of the two.
I think in general, Center will probably be. It's difficult because Tech Center for robots is always going to be like a draw 3, draw 4, draw 5. If you're playing it for less than that, it's not worth playing really for robots. Yeah. But Mark of Sleep, the power cap can be so much higher than Tech Center. So Tech Center, if you draw 4, it's a great card, but Mark of Sleep potentially can win you the game in the sense of you can just literally stop someone from doing something for an entire turn. They might be dependent on actions. They might have some combo in hand that they were waiting to play. You might not never know. You might not know that you've stopped them from winning the game potentially, or you might not know that was the card that won you the game. But I think the power is so much higher.
I'm thinking of an example of a game that we've played, probably most recently, where someone was a bit. I think it was an Explorer faction, and something like a Mark of Sleep would have prevented any after the base scored actions being played. And I think that would have made an enormous difference to how the game would potentially have come through as an outcome. So I can see. I need to play the tricksters more, to be honest. I quite like the sound of these little tricky buggers where they're ruining people's fun.
It's tricky because you can't. With Tech Center, you can see the outcome of the card, so you can see how good it was for you. But with Mark of Sleep, you don't see the outcome, so it's difficult to get its power.
That's where I really like Luke's argument, because at the end of the day, you want to play this game for you as much as you also want to play this game to prevent other people. But I quite like the idea of being the arse, and that's why Mark of Sleep gets it for me.
It's got some like Yoda-looking character in the background.
Yes, yeah. Although pretty creepy that he's lording over that poor lady that's laying down. But I guess we won't talk about that.
Luke, are you happy with that?
Yeah, fine. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I like the card. I like the card.
Let's put Tech Center down there. Let's put Mark of Sleep through. So next up, we've got Winds of Change for the Wizards and Shinobi for the Ninjas. So who wants to kick us off on this? How about you, Luke, on this one?
Yeah, fine. I prefer Winds of Change.
Okay.
And the reason is, I feel like whenever I play ninjas, I'm sat on a Shinobi. and I'm always waiting for that moment where I can steal a point, 2 points, get a decent turn. It feels like you're generally throwing him away quite a lot. If you can grab a couple of points, you can never get a big play out of it. You can never. It's very hard. It's very hard to get a big turn. Okay, I might have just stolen a base off someone else. Is it worth 1 victory point? Is it worth 2? Am I just tagging him on to get the spare victory point in 3rd place? It feels like, okay, he might be worth 1, maximum 2 victory points on his own, which is quite good. But equally, if you'd have played him during the turn anyway, you might have still been in the same position. So I think the change is so little, he just doesn't excite me like seeing Winds of Change does. Okay, I can get rid of my whole hand, I can smash around my cards, I'll play that right at the end, and then I'll keep going. I'll play as many down as I can, and then this is my right back, refreshing. This is draw power, essentially. How many cards can I get rid of? And then I'll keep going. I'll go back in again. Anything that you can break with the Wizards combo is based around this, where you're getting a fresh hand. And I think that's very, very strong.
Lee?
I'm inclined to agree with some of the things that you're saying there, particularly on Winds of Change. Holding that till you've got 1 card left in your hand, shuffling that 1 card, well, no cards in it at the end of the day. You play your minion down, you shuffle that in as you actually draw 5 cards, you've got a fresh hand, and then you draw 2 at the end of the turn. You've got a full 7 to start the next round with, and that is very powerful. But to me, I think you said it yourself, when you play Shinobi, and I agree that I've been in a position where I've essentially had it sat in my hand waiting for an opportunity to play it. But when you play Shinobi, it is 1 card for at least 1 victory point, if not more. And to me, that's why Shinobi's the better card, because every time you have... For you to be able to play 1 card to get 1 victory point, and we'll talk about the Invader later, when you can play 1 card to get 1 victory point, you play 1 card to get 1 victory point at every given opportunity. And that, for me, is why Shinobi is better, because you only really play it when you've got the chance of it getting you that extra 1 victory point. It's not really a minion play, it's an extra minion play, and you play it just before a base is scoring. So that is where you are sneaky ninjas, you jump on the base, you steal that extra victory point, and to me, 1 card for 1 victory point is well worth it.
But for me also, I also find that there's times when you don't have another minion in your hand, and playing Shinobi feels like a waste. So you won't play it. You might choose not to play it because you don't have the control of, okay, I'm going to nick this point. So I think he sits in your hand longer than he should. And if that was another minion, he'd be down, he'd be doing things, he'd be getting involved.
By the same contrast, I think that Winds of Change does the same thing, because you'd be grudged to almost throw away 4 cards if you're only going to get 5 back. So I agree that you can kind of hold Shinobi, but I also think you hold Winds of Change. So I think it's quite a good pair to compare, actually. When I was first kind of looking at it, I didn't really think about exactly why these two might have stood off against one another. I can completely accept either going through. But to me, the extra victory points that you are potentially going to get from Shinobi... Oh, and I'm just trying to think of this as well. I can't really think of many more play before a base scores in the base set. So it's pretty much exclusively for the base set when it was written, one of its kind. There's been a few more that have kind of copied it a little bit later on that are probably a bigger power and with extra sort of things on. But really, before a base scores, it's supposed to be that kind of ninja, like jumping on a base kind of thing. So that's where I think it stands out to me, and that's where I think it's a little bit different.
This is a really tricky one, this one, because I'm inclined to agree with what both of you have said. As you say, Lee, with Winds of Change, you can have a situation where you've got a couple of cards in hand that you don't want to shuffle in, and Winds of Change then just has to sit there until those cards have been played, and that could be a while. But then there's on the same side of the coin, really, Shinobi's the same sort of situation. You can hold it for absolutely ages. When had it been another 3-power minion, you might have just played it, and you actually had a play that you could make. So there's times where you've got Shinobi in hand, but you've just had to not make a minion play that turn because, well, Shinobi's better when it's a free play before a base scores. And I mean, when I saw the pairing, I was more inclined towards Winds of Change, but the problem with Shinobi for me is that if you're playing the core set, you know they've got a Shinobi in hand. There's no surprise there at all.
Yeah.
Or if you're playing against ninjas, they've always got Shinobi in hand. So if you can do something to stop it, great. I mean, but you should always expect it coming. It's not a surprise play anymore with ninjas, which is why I was more inclined to give it to Winds of Change, because Winds of Change is a free card. You get the action straight back. So the playing of Winds of Change, if you can shuffle in and draw 3, draw 4, even draw 5 if you've got no other cards, is really good. Then you basically got your turn again. But I think I can't disagree with the fact that Shinobi, as a minimum, is 1 victory point, and that is too strong. Smash Up is a game all about victory points, so I just can't not give it to Shinobi. As much as I don't want to, I can't deny the kind of power level of Shinobi here. Despite the fact that you always know it's coming.
There's nothing you can do to stop it. Not in the concept.
Yeah. Well, we're about to see a card that you can potentially
Oh,
stop it with, yeah. So we're giving it to Shinobi. Okay.
good decision. Good decision, Mark. I think good decision.
So up next, we've got a couple of big ones. Another huge round 1 pairing here. Terraforming versus Overrun. So this is the kind of other side of the coin to Mark of Sleep, really. Overrun is the stopping all minion plays. Mark of Sleep is the stopping all action plays. Now Overrun is obviously amazing, because how do you break a base if you can't put minions down? So it can be the equivalent of gaining you a couple of victory points, because if you can slap Overrun down at the same time as almost breaking the base, and you break the base on your next turn, well, that's uncontested points potentially. So Overrun itself can be, 3, 4, even just 1 victory point for you. However, Terraforming, it's just unreal. It's such a strong card, and the fact that you can search the base deck for any base, swap it in, it can potentially lose your opponent's victory points, gain new victory points. It can be a bigger victory point swing than Overrun. For me, it has to go to Terraforming, and not even that, but Terraforming gives you the effect of destroying the actions on the base and also playing an extra minion, so it's kind of unnecessary extra effects that it didn't even need to be a powerful card, but it just makes it even more powerful. So I think for me, it just has to go for Terraforming. Even if you're just using the core set, you've got things like Jungle Oasis, where you can potentially shaft someone who's powered up chucked a load of power on a base, and they only get 2 victory points for it. You can change it out for a ninja base. You get 3 victory points, they get 2, and they might have previously been getting 5 compared to your 3 or something like that. So it's a huge victory point swing. Terraforming, for me, it just has to go in.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's easy now, but we'll see when it starts getting down to some later pairings. But there is no card I want to see in my hand more out of every card in the base set than this card. I want it in my hand as soon as possible, and then I want to do that big play, the big play that upsets everybody. Oh, you think this is happening? No, this is what's happening. Everything's changed all of a sudden, and here's an extra minion. You have total control over that, and you just bide the right moment where you can play it, and it can be a massive, massive swing. The breadth of the bases in if you're playing all the sets, if we're just counting it down to the base set, even just the base set has some strong bases in. The Jungle Oasis, like you said, there's some the ninja bases. They're really easy picks to disrupt it. And as soon as you expand it into the other bases of the other sets, you've got a world of choice. You've got the break point to control, the victory points, and the base actions, and you get to play an extra minion. There isn't a card as strong as that as a base action. I do like Overrun, but it goes back to my point of you disrupting. You're actually disrupting more than one person, so it's better than Mark of Sleep from that point of view. It is limited to the end of the turn, so I do prefer it to Mark of Sleep in this instance. But Terraforming is the better card.
That's true. I didn't pick up on that, but the reason I would say Mark of Sleep is better is that Overrun, you have to play it on a base, obviously, and there's actions that can destroy playing base actions. Like in the core set, the Tricksters have got a couple, Ninjas have got one.
Or Terraforming.
Or Terraforming as well, yeah. And then as well, people can move. You can move to the overrun base, so it doesn't actually stop people from getting minions on there as well. It's not a complete protection from playing minions.
I'm not kidding. I've been in a position where we've been playing where I have had overrun with the choking vines on a base. It stopped anybody else playing anything on it, and I was terraformed before it came around to my turn, and the base was actually turned over. It's got to be terraforming. There's barely any conversation to be had on this. It seems pretty odd that I said that zombies were my favourite faction. I've run out. I've the opposing camp, but. I said before, and I say it again, that zombies are good as a group. They're individually weak, but that's the whole point of a zombie, isn't it? It's individually very weak. It's got to be terrifying. The additional actions, the fact that you get to shuffle extra things in, you get to play an extra minion on the new base. It has, as far as I am aware, it has no rival for power in any of the sets that I think have come since. It is arguably the strongest card in the game, and it's almost unfair that you've put it into this as a combination, because I think it might be a strong favourite to win.
Oh, well, I think there's one stronger card, but I agree it's definitely one of the strongest cards in the game. Just for that swing factor, it's so swingy.
The power is impressive.
The one thing I will say is that
terraform me a few times as well.
The one thing I will say about terraforming is you can't. If you've got it in your opening hand, you're not going to play it. It's one of those cards you just sit on until you've got the right moment in time. But it's not a completely flexible, free playing card. You do have to sit and wait for that right moment.
Yeah, but you're glad to see it every time you see it. If you play a game with aliens and you don't see that card, you are sad about it. You are upset.
I will say though, it is dependent on the base deck. So, for instance, if you're playing just core set, and Jungle Oasis has already gone, for instance, it's already been played. Both the ninja bases are already out. A lot of good targets are gone. So terraforming isn't necessarily. It's quite situationally good, but it's not necessarily.
Then again, so is Overrun.
Yeah, Overrun you sit and wait on as well. I'm not disagreeing on that. I'm just saying I'm kind of prepping my future arguments here, I suppose, for what might win this.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that's pretty unanimous, that one. So on to the next one, then we've got big bad King Rex over here against one of the other powerhouses. We've got a double powerhouse pairing here. King Rex against the Microbot Alpha, the two big finishers, really.
I love both of these cards.
Anyone want to throw some love on King Rex?
I think when you draw the big dog, you are excited to get him down and play him in a position. But I am terrified of playing King Rex because it breeds huge amounts of overconfidence. There is no other 7 in one card, straight banger, that you get to shut down and just be like, I've won this base. But I don't know how many times I've played a King Rex and not won, because I was overconfident and cocky at the fact that I was chucking down King Rex. To me, the winner's Microbot Alpha. It's quirky, but I think the fact that I play a lot of Swarm means that it powers up my whole board rather than powers up on one thing. Plus, I like the fact that it's plucky. A 1 power minion, it looks like it's pretty crap. It's not supposed to do anything, but as soon as you stick it down, it gets powered up by absolutely everything else that's on the board. Great little ghost pairing, or ideally zombie pairing, zombie robots as a banned faction combo, really, isn't it? But when you start looking at a combo like that, when you start to play an awful lot of quick play, fast, low power minions that you get to chuck down on the board, you pull out Microbot Alpha, it's going to be game over for something, somewhere. But I guess head to head, it's an arguable conversation to have, isn't it? Again, I think I prefer Microbot Alpha because of the quirk between the two. But if you told me that King Rex was better because he was a more powerful minion, well, I wouldn't argue with that either. I guess they've both got their strengths.
I was just muting because there's a plane going overhead. I don't know if you can actually hear that or not. I can't. It's a really tricky one because King Rex is so iconic. I just love King Rex because it's King Rex and it's just 7 power blank. And it's one of those things when you think of Smash Up, you think of King Rex quite high on that list in the game. It's a really tricky one because King Rex is one that you can play at any time. There's no real drawback to playing a King Rex. It's always just a good play. Whereas Microbot Alpha, obviously, you're not going to play it in your opening hand. You are waiting for that turn where you've got the board ready and you can use Alpha to break one base and you can use your other minions to break another base and you've got a 2-base kind of combo going. I mean, I would have to give it to Alpha. It's a reluctant giving it to Alpha, but I just like King Rex so much. And head to head in this, I have to give it to Alpha, but I kind of want Luke to say for King Rex, so I can kind of get in behind that as well. It's saving on King Rex.
It's this tricky. This one. This is a tough one because you're weighing up 7 power against a question mark of power. You could get 7 fairly comfortably. You can get more than 7. You can get less than 7. It's a question mark of when you play it, what time, how much power it's worth. Does it break the base as well as King Rex does? Probably. You're probably playing it at a moment where you're going to get a 7, possibly more. It links so well with the other cards that you're playing. Rex doesn't do anything other than add 7 power. That is it. That's his ceiling. That's his limit. But it's a very high ceiling.
It's the equivalent of 2 minions.
I do like it.
It's the equivalent of playing down 2 minions, a 3 and a 4 power minion, isn't it? It's that good.
Yeah.
And
if you
it's your
pair it
combo
with the right
Rampage.
action,
Yeah, Rampage. It's your combo.
exactly. You are essentially, yeah. And you know, I was thinking about this in terms of combos. Obviously, you play your robots with basically anything you like because it's robots. But with dinosaurs, I feel like when I first played dinosaurs, I think it was the first time I ever played the game, and I was expecting them to be this mega drop down, huge play faction. I don't think I ever drew the king, so I kind of didn't really get the experience of dinosaurs, and it wasn't until I paired them with something like Mythic Horses, and then again later on, and my favourite pairing for dinosaurs is Disco Dancers. And if you've not played Disco Dancers Dinosaurs, you need to play Disco Dancing Dinosaurs because the fact that you can rip King Rex out a couple of times it's phenomenal. So I'm erring towards King Rex, but only because you have to play him with a very specific faction. As a standalone card, Microbot Alpha's better. I think it's difficult to argue otherwise because it pairs with everything. Whereas King Rex, 7 power, yeah, and that's great. It might win you the base, but Microbot Alpha might win you 2. And I think if you've got a chance of winning 2 bases, it's a better card.
Thing is, the Alpha should never have had those 2 lines of text on it. When I re-looked at the robots, I basically split those 2 up because the fact that it's got both of those lines of text makes it as strong as it is. You remove either one, it's not a great card, but it's just because it's got both. It's such a powerful card, just in isolation. So I think, reluctantly, I'd have to give this one to Alpha, but I really want to see King Rex go through.
Yeah.
I've got a soft spot for King Rex. Can we just talk for a second about how cool that picture of King Rex is?
Oh,
it's a T-Rex.
Comparing it with that, I mean, there's no comparison.
Rocket launchers, is it, on his back?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, he's the king. He wears whatever the hell he wants.
I think Microbot Alpha is better, but I'll be sad to see King Rex go.
Thing is, I think
King Rex is cooler. Hands down.
I think we're maybe splitting hairs here because whatever goes through is going to be paired up against Terraforming. So I don't necessarily.
It doesn't matter. Send whichever.
Well, I don't think we can argue King Rex can beat Terraforming.
No, but Microbot Alpha might have a chance, and I think that's probably another way to think about it. I think, again, purely on the pairing, if you get the right pairing with King Rex, he's a killer. But if you get any pairing with Microbot Alpha, it's a great card.
Yeah.
It's got to be Alphabot.
I agree, sadly.
So, reluctant agree.
Reluctant.
Sorry, King Rex.
Put it through. Okay, so next up, Battle of the King Minions here. We've got Ninja Master and Leprechaun for the Tricksters. Interesting one, this. Got the 2 King Minions up against each other. Well, we had 2, arguably, King Minions up against each other last round, actually, as well. Who wants to say which one they think should go through here, then?
I'll go first. I think Leprechaun is better. The reason is it has recurring power. It prevents someone playing on a base, and that is very, very strong. If you have a base with a good ability on it that you want to churn over and over again, you can protect that base. You can manipulate it. It has a lot of ways that you can manipulate that base because people don't want to play on it. They are reluctant to get anywhere near it. Ninja Master's good. It adds 5 power, and you destroy anything, which is incredibly strong. It's very, very rare that you can destroy anything, any minion, I should say. But I think Leprechaun allows you to manipulate the game in your favour more than Ninja Master does. You want Leprechaun to be out and stay out, whereas Ninja Master, once you've played him, he's done his job, he's adding 5 power. Leprechaun is there to stay, and he's there to help you win.
Yeah, Leprechaun's it's a really great area control card. So basically you can put a Leprechaun down and pretty much nothing can be played onto that base, so you can protect that base. It's essentially Overrun, but as a permanent effect. Although you can play King Rex into Leprechaun, so, can we put King Rex through? For me, Ninja Master...
I think if you'd have paired these two up, we might be having a different conversation.
That's very true. Ninja Master is amazing. The fact that you can destroy absolutely anything. I mean, it can destroy a jacked up first mate, it can destroy a 15 power Macrobat Alpha. That is an amazing ability. There's very, very little that has that kind of uncapped destruction effect or this destruction ability that Ninja Master has. However, Ninja Master is best when you're playing it with Hidden Ninja. When you have that swing turn before a base scores where you can drop your 5 power but destroy their 5 power and you get a 10 power swing and you win a base out of nowhere, really. So that's when Ninja Master is best. As a standalone card, I'd probably give it to Leprechaun, but the Ninja Master's ability is very, very strong, and I could be convinced either way here.
Again, I think given the right pairing, if you pair it with a faction that's able to let you pick that card up and replay its ability several times over, that's where I think Ninja Master's power is. You pair them with something like the Aliens, and you get a chance to pick it up and chuck it back down again a couple of times. You're able to really mess with another team's game plan by destroying a lot of their minions. Particularly good against someone like Luke, who likes to build up 1 or 2 minions with lots and lots of power.
First mate.
The fact that it's uncapped is very, very powerful. Although I wouldn't be your bear cat with that, would I? Still, but not allowed to play those anymore. So. But I do think that the Leprechaun has. Again, perhaps a bit more nostalgia for me. I quite like the Tricksters as a faction, more so than I like the Ninjas. So I think probably out of prejudice, I'd give it to the Leprechaun.
This was a tricky one to decide, actually, because thinking about the 2 best cards in the Tricksters faction, Leprechaun was the first pick, and then the second pick could have been a couple of things, and there wasn't really anything at Leprechaun's kind of power level. So I think Leprechaun is definitely the best card in the Tricksters faction, just because it is that ability is so strong. So I mean, I would agree. I'd give it to the Leprechaun.
I can't disagree.
Okay, I think we're all agreeing on that. I think Leprechaun might have a tough next round, though.
Yeah, interesting.
So here we have it.
I can't imagine this is going to be a particularly long conversation.
Well, these are 2 absolutely iconic core set cards right here. I mean, when you think of Smash Up, you think of King Rex, but Invader's probably quite high up, and probably Archmage as well, in fairness. Do you want me to start on this one?
Yeah, go on then.
I mean, it's got to be Invader, right? It's a free victory point. You play Invader, you can play it whenever you want. You 1/15th of the way towards winning the game. What can be better than that, to be honest? For me, Invader is, when you're on about terraforming, Invader is my personal favourite minion, but also probably my kind of pick for strongest card in the game, full stop, just because it's so good. I can't think, there hasn't been, actually there's probably one in Munchkin somewhere, which I don't have, but I don't recall another card that gives you just a free victory point. when you can just play it
Ghosts.
straight off the bat. There's always some. Well, it has a condition attached. So Ghost, you have to have 2 cards or less. All the other cards that give you victory points have some kind of condition, whereas Invader is just a straight play it, get a victory point. Archmage is great. It should have been 5 power. I don't know why it was made 4, because they thought the Wizards might have been too strong. Playing extra action on each returns is really good. I can't disagree with that, but there's just no comparison in terms of power level. I mean, as I say, Invader, the game is all about victory points, and the fact that you can just play an Invader and already be 1/15 of the way towards the victory is just too strong for me. So I'd have to give it to Invader. It's not even close, this one.
Here's a question for you. If you couldn't pick up Invader, you play it once, it goes to the discard pile, you never see it again, would and same for Archmage, would you still pick Invader?
I think so still. I still think so, because obviously you've got 2 Invaders, so that's 2 victory points. So that's...
Okay, well, let's say you've got 1 card, you can pick between one of these 2, you get 1 copy. Is the 3 power and the 1 victory point worth more than playing extra actions as long as you can? And let's be honest, you're going to put that Archmage on a base that you don't want to disappear. Is it worth 1 victory point and 3 power versus repeated extra actions as long as that guy is on the field?
I would say so. It's tricky because obviously the Archmage is as good as your actions are. So you need good actions and you need to be drawing into them timed, to play into the Archmage's ability. Whereas Invader, we talked the first pairing about First Mate being a card that you build around. Invader is the other big card that I would do all my combos based around, because that ability is just unbelievably good, and you need some way of abusing that ability. Same as the First Mate. The First Mate, if you think about it, if you power it up enough, it becomes like the ability may as well just say gain 15 victory points, because that's effectively what it does. It's a sticky minion that keeps on getting you victory points like the Invader. Invader, as I say, is another minion that you're just building around. Like, if you pick Aliens first, your second faction has to support the Invader strategy, really. Otherwise, you're not playing it right. So I'd still go with the Invader, even if it's just gaining, even if you only got 1 of them. Archmage, okay, yeah, you might get several turns of use out of it, but it's likely that your opponent will try and break that base and your Archmage is gone. And as I say, it's a great card, but it's dependent on what actions you've got, how you're drawing into those actions for it to be really good. And for me, there's just no comparison. The Invader is just too good. Lee?
Interesting. I don't know. On the face of it, so I used the argument earlier on for Shinobi that whenever you can play 1 card for 1 victory point, that to me is the way forward. So I'm pretty sure that my answer is going to be Invader. But let's just look purely at the face of it, and I think Luke hit on the key point, really. If you couldn't pick Invader up, would it be better? And I think as a card, I don't think it would be, because essentially unlimited action plays is going to win you the game. Like you said earlier on, the reason for putting Mark of Sleep through was that you can prevent someone from playing half of the game. Well, if you double your chances of playing half of the game, you're playing 50% more game than everybody else by playing an extra action every turn, then surely by default, you're in a better position. So I actually think, based purely on the cards, 1 for 1, the Archmage is a better card, purely based on face value for the cards. What I think you do when you're talking about the Invader is you're talking about the Aliens faction overall, because you're talking about picking that card up and you're talking about replaying that card over and over again. And that's fine, because I get that. And that is essentially the core mechanic of Aliens, isn't it? Fuck people over with terraforming. Oops, I shouldn't have sworn. Sorry, my bad. Screw people over with terraforming.
That's the watershed now.
I'm sorry, demonetized. And then play that card to pick up Invader to keep multiplying your victory points. And to be perfectly honest, if you get 3 victory points out of 1 Invader and you've got 2 of them, then it's done its job, and it's exactly what it needs to have done, and in fact probably more so than it ever would need to have done. But if you're talking purely on face value, Archmage is a better card, because you can play 50% more game than your opponents can play. So purely on face value.
I would say to that, though, we shouldn't have put First Mate through in the first round.
Yes, we should. Yes, we should.
It's funny because I think my argument's changed as the game's gone on. I think that if we were to go back through and look at them again, I might not necessarily say the same ones go through based purely on that. I think as I'm starting to get through this, looking purely at the face value, I think the Archmage is a better card. But I think my vote would go towards the Invader because I think the Invader's giving you a better chance to win.
And this is where it comes down.
I've purely contradicted myself, haven't I? I've essentially just completely contradicted myself.
And this is where it comes down to what I said at the start there about what does best mean in a game like Smash Up. And we're comparing card for card here. But it's also just in the core sets, the context of the core set, what is the best card in the core set? And there's a bit of comparison as a standalone card, but there's also a bit in terms of that what's best in the wider context of the game. And I think for me, it just has to go to the Invader just because of that ability. As a standalone card or in combination with lots of other things, it would always just go to the Invader for me just because it is that strong, just completely no conditions attached, gain a victory point.
My concern, I'm looking here at the next round a little bit, and I'm starting to think Invader or Terraforming is going to win this, and I don't like the Aliens faction, so I'd like that to not happen.
I don't think
so. If I could eliminate one at this point, I'd be even happier. But I don't know. I think I could be happy with either. But if I am comparing again, if we're using first mate logic, I think Invader's better because in the grand context, Invader's a better card. If we're using Mark of Sleep option, card for card, Archmage is a better card.
The thing is, if we don't put Invader through, we're going to get a torrent of hate and trolling on YouTube because of it. Because the Smash Up community would be in uproar if we didn't put Invader through.
I agree entirely with Tank's argument. I think you get more use out of the Archmage, and I think playing more cards than your opponent. Yes, it does depend on how good your actions are. But there's some really good actions. If you play something with really good actions over and over and over again, something like
Cyborg Apes,
or I've forgotten the name. The sword fighting guys, the French guys.
Musketeers.
The Musketeers have got a lot of repeated quick actions that can just stack and stack and stack.
And ones that chain. You're absolutely right there, Luke. I didn't even think about that. But if you play one down that starts to chain into another 3 or 4 that you get to whip out, even better paired with a faction that you can play from discard as well. Well, you can't have 3 factions together, but you know what I mean. You're playing into some real serious strengths there. No, I completely agree.
Because this is sorry, go on, Luke. Finish what you want to
say. So I think it does depend on what your extra actions are. I think it's a very strong card, but I'll be very sad to see it go because my vote is for Invader. Whenever you have aliens, even if you don't pick them up, you are always 2, 3, 4 victory points ahead of your opponents. You just you're just silently churning through. You're picking up victory points as you go. You're also breaking bases, and it just gives you the lead. And it's very, very hard to stop.
The thing is, there's certainly nothing in the core set you can really do about it as well because Overrun is probably the only thing. Even Leprechaun, you still get the ability. Leprechaun will then just destroy the Invader. We're starting to speak in contradictions almost because we're saying Invaders. If we're looking at them just against each other, we're saying Invader's not as good because it's reliant on other cards, but then we're saying Archmage is better because of the other cards that you're using with it. So to me it has to go to Invader. Just even as standalone or in the wider context, even if you've got some of the strongest actions in the game. I think they're both amazing cards, but
I have to say it was fun watching you die a little bit inside when it looked like me and Luke were going to miss out range. That was quite fun.
I just can't not see Invader go through. It's just too good. It's one of those cards that if you're going to go back and make the core set again, you probably wouldn't make Invader, I'd say.
No.
Or you'd
at least redesign.
Yeah, you'd fundamentally redesign the Aliens faction.
Yeah,
probably because Invader's just one of those cards that they've never done again because just that gaining free victory point without any conditions attached is just ridiculous. And I think they know that.
Ridiculous. I'll tell you what's interesting though. If you'd have put Archmage against a lot of other cards in this system, I wonder how Archmage would have done because I don't think it deserves to be knocked out. There's been other cards that have gone through, for example, Mark of Sleep, that I think Archmage would have trounced in a head-to-head.
Thing is, it's tricky though because ultimately on something like this, unless it can be everything in the field, it's going to get knocked out at some point. So
exactly. Yeah, there is
it
no
doesn't
best,
really
best
matter.
card. It's head to heads, and I get that.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter if it gets through to the final. If it's not better than one other card, it's not going to win. So
Yeah.
it's just happened to come up against the Invader in round 1.
I think from a consideration point of view, I think it's good to consider them standalone against each other, and also their interaction and dependence on other cards.
Yeah,
I think you need to. I think looking at both, while we may not decide that we've got one solid unit of measurement for it, I think looking at both decides how good they are.
yeah, and I think that's
Because
what
they need to stand alone and they need to mesh.
that's it. It's
I think
looking at
that's-
everything, isn't
there's
it?
two
To
tests,
decide best.
It's almost like, is the card good standalone? Yes. Okay, well, how else can I compare these two cards? Because both standalone versions of those cards are good, if not great. But when you pair them in the wider context, Invader probably comes out a little bit ahead. If for nothing else, that it's one card for one victory point. And I'm sorry, that is the aim of the game. So
Yeah, it's tricky because there's some cards you can't, like Full Sail, for instance, you can't really consider that as a standalone card because what are you moving? You need minions to move with Full Sail, so it's tricky how you actually determine what the best is. But I think it has to have some kind of consideration of as a standalone, but also in that wider context. I don't think you can just look at one or the other. But Invader wins on both counts for me. We happy with that?
Yep.
probably a 60-40 for me, but I'll give it to Invader.
It's tough because, as you say, I mean, had Archmage come up against Leprechaun or
Most other
Exchange or-
things in that set, actually, I'd probably not Leprechaun. I think Leprechaun might have taken it. So I guess that's an interesting point to make because it probably would have lost in the next round. So
a message popped up a while ago to say that Zoom they've extended the 40-minute thing, so we don't have to change, which is good.
Oh, even better.
Right, so into round 2. So this is where things really start to heat up a bit.
Oh,
Double Pirates.
Full Sail or First Mate? Where do we even begin with this?
You didn't want First Mate to go through, Mark, so you should start us off.
Are we putting Tenacious Z through then? Are we retracting that first round?
no, he's dead and he's not coming back this time.
Well, that's the whole point. This is when he comes back now, just to surprise you.
We might be able to wildcard him near the end if we want.
I mean, this for me this could be the final. To be honest, this is such a difficult round. What's better, Full Sail or First Mate? I think for me, it would be Full Sail, just because of that effect, the fact that you can use it during your play cards phase, but also before a base scores. And Full Sail is the winning card. There's not necessarily too much setup needed, whereas First Mate, to get that really powerful First Mate, you need a lot of setup to get anything like that, and it's a high priority target. Your opponents can do stuff about it. They can play removal, they can shuffle it in, they can discard it or whatever it might be, destroy it. Whereas Full Sail, they can't really stop this unless you're playing Tricksters and you play Mark of Sleep to stop them doing it on their turn. You can't really do anything about the Full Sail, just hold on to it for that perfect turn, the winning turn of the game. You play your Full Sail down, you win the game, you move your stuff around, you win the game. It's tricky because Full Sail uses the First Mate, so a Full Sail is as good as your First Mates are, and your other stuff as well. It's not entirely dependent on it. Whereas First Mate, I think you do have to do that entire build around. So you pick your Pirates faction, then as you say, you pick another faction to purely build around those First Mates. Whereas I think Full Sail is just a bit more. It requires just a bit less setup for me. It's a bit more versatile. You don't necessarily need your First Mate. Your other pairing could be something entirely different that doesn't set up a First Mate, but Full Sail can still be the card that wins you the game. And Full Sail is just such a strong card. So I'd give it to Full Sail here. But it's so tricky because First Mate plays into Full Sail, and First Mate by itself, you might not even need Full Sail in the game if you can jack up that First Mate to such a high power level. So I would give it to Full Sail, but I'm completely open to being persuaded on this.
I mean, I know my answer. I love Full Sail; it's great. But what you're also doing, you do gain a lot of You play it at the time you want to play it, but it's reliant on you having plenty of minions out, enough minions to be able to move and make a considerable dent in the victory points. And if you're struggling or you're being destroyed, there might not be a time when you end up playing Full Sail for either for enough points or for enough gain. You then also remove all of the minions that you've moved off the board because they're gone. So any other control of any of the bases that you had, you're contributing a lot of power to do it. Now, before the base stores is the key bit. You get to decide if it's worth doing or not. You've always got that choice. But for me, First Mate is still better because he stays on the board. And that is an extra minion play all the time. It's a constant extra 2. Every single time a base breaks, you've got an extra minion play of 2 because he stays out. And it might be more than 2 if you can get him higher than 2, which is always the aim. But Full Sail, while it is very powerful at winning victory points, it removes a lot of your cards off the board, and you've got to already have enough minions out there to do it.
Although
And
I'd say to that you only play Full Sail when you win in the game, though, really. So it doesn't really matter, I suppose, about losing your board presence.
yeah, if you've got the game in your hand, fine. But there's entirely the chance that you never play that card because you've never got the opportunity. Okay, that's going to win me the game. That's going to do this. As soon as you've got First Mate in your hand, you play it down every single time, straight away. That's your choice.
It's interesting to talk about this. The interesting point you said was about constantly having a 2-player minion to play down. And I've just got a quick sort of question that I kind of burned through when you were talking about that. What would you consider the better card between Tenacious Z or Full Sail?
Me or Luke?
Full Sail
Luke.
still.
So you still think Full Sail over Tenacious Z? But you just said First Mate is better because you get to constantly play a 2-player minion?
Yes, but there's also the chance that he's not just a 2-player minion.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't. You probably wouldn't.
His minimum,
yeah,
his absolute minimum is an extra 2-power minion. That's all that he gives you, an extra 2-power minion. Whereas that's his minimum level he's going to give you. He's also, if you can get him up to 3, 4, 5, he's going to give you a 5-power minion every time. And that is the difference for me.
It's interesting because I'm sat thinking, would I prefer Full Sail or Z? And I think I would prefer Z. Well, no, but to help me to contextualise this, because to be perfectly honest, between those 2 cards, it's very difficult.
There you go, problem solved.
No.
Between those 2 cards, between Full Sail and First Mate, it's very difficult for me to pick a winner without trying to use some pretty twisted logic. But if I was to say if it was Full Sail or Z, I'd probably pick Z. So that must mean that I have to pick First Mate in this round because I've already picked First Mate over Z. So it's funny that I'm probably going to say Full Sail because I think it's the better card for allowing you to win the game. And this is where it comes up against sort of, like Mark was saying earlier on, where you put the cards and where you pitch them. To me, the better individual card for playing the game is probably First Mate because you've used other factions to power that card up. However, you play Full Sail when you are going to win the game. That is a game-winning, base-winning card. And again, my logic earlier on has been if you can play 1 card to steal 1 victory point, you play 1 card for 1 victory point. And Full Sail is a card that you play for several victory points. If not, at least several victory points in one go. And that's why, to me, the Full Sail is the better card.
Counterpoint, First Mate ends up on every base. He'll probably get you at least 3rd place. Even if you are playing a 4-player game where the bases are breaking quickly, he's there.
You can't say that. Because if you're playing against an alien faction, they just pick your First Mate up. So you've spent all game banging on points onto him, and then someone just goes, "Now you got to pick him up now." And
Yeah.
you just sat there going, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" Like, all right, he's not dead, but he's pretty much useless because then you got to spend the rest of the game powering him up.
Just on,
I've
Like,
been on
you
the
played the
receiving
entire
end of that.
game for a big play. Now, you and I have played a lot of these games together now. You've only big played me once with a first mate in my entire recollection of the game.
Yeah, I'm always waiting for that mega combo so that I can break the game.
And that's why I think Full Sail is the better card, because I think it's probably going to get used for a bigger effect more times than it isn't compared to a first mate.
thing is, there's three things there, I suppose. That you mentioned all of them, Ellie. The first one is that First Mate is the Dreamers. It's the Smash Up Dreamers card. How many times have you tried? You've got this perfect idea in your head. Oh, I'm going to have a 30 power First Mate. I'm going to win the game. It's going to be amazing. And how many times has that ever actually happened? It's so.
Once with Luke, once.
It's the
It
Dreamers.
was impressive.
But when it does happen, it's the best feeling in the world.
It's great. I agree. But
Yeah, Luke sat there with no victory points, and all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, by the way, guys, here's my last thing. There's 30 counters on the first mate. You guys are done. There's nothing you can do."
well, yeah, it's Smash Up bait basically. It draws you in. It's like the honey trap basically, but then it never actually realizes itself because your first mate's on the bottom of the deck or whatever it might be, and your game sucks. But I think the second thing for me is you mentioned there as well, Lee, that you build your combo around the first mate, but your opponent should also be building their factions around how they can beat first mate. As soon as they see you pick pirates, okay, what are my anti-first mate picks basically? So like you say, oh, I'll pick aliens then because I've got really good counter cards to the first mate, a really powerful first mate. So Full Sail, you can't really counter it. It doesn't have a counter pick really. And then the third thing, the same thing that you asked me about the Invader and Archmage, I'll ask you the same question. If you could have one first mate or one for Full Sail card, which do you pick?
I would pick one Full Sail card. I would, because one of the strengths of First Mate is there's 4 of them.
We've done him, man. We've done him.
If it's one card for one play in one standalone situation, Full Sail is better. But
here's an interesting question.
Go on.
Would Mark, for you, would Z have beaten for Full Sail?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I mean,
my vote
is great.
My vote is still for First Mate.
I mean, I'll still go for Full Sail, so it's up to you then, Lee.
Okay, let me just ask you a question. If we were doing the opposite of what you asked me, and we're deciding based on the impact of the card and the number of those cards in its faction, where do you two sit? So it's 4 first mates versus 1 Full Sail card. You have to get rid of one of them from the game. Which do you get rid of?
What do you mean? I don't understand the concept.
So which is better? Which would you keep?
4 first mates or a Full Sail?
You keep 4 over 1, but we're not doing that, are we? We're not comparing the volume of cards against one another.
Well, I think
that is one of the benefits of First Mate is that you've got 4 of them. But as I say, for me, it's not necessarily the number of them. It's because First Mate is so.
We're talking about the best card. They're talking about the best card. That's individual, singular.
Yeah, but you've got copies of that card. Look, if Full Sail wins, I'm fine with that. It's a good card, but I think First Mate is the better card.
I think there have been times where I've been wanting to use Full Sail and haven't been able to use it because the right situation has not been presented to me. But I think those situations have been fewer than the number of times I've watched you slowly try to build up a First Mate only to counter him before you do anything with it.
Slowly? I think you'll find it's lightning fast. Lightning fast.
Oh, I can see it coming 100 million miles away.
I'm there. Mad scientists. Uber serum on him. Boom. He's off. Power counter from the power 5 minion every time. Oh no, you could take one of them out. I've got another 2, 3, 4. Boom.
As I say, Dreamer's card.
Yeah.
It's such a Dreamer's card.
It is a Dreamer's card.
Works though.
Lee,
dreams do come true.
Are you sticking with me on Full Sail, Lee?
I am sticking with you on Full Sail.
Right.
I am.
Not happy about that.
Sail's through. We've got a very different tie now because obviously that was such a difficult one. We've got two relatively weak cards, I'd say, compared to First Mate and Full Sail here. In the Shinobi and Mark of Sleep. It's tough to really pitch this one.
I think it's easy for me, this one. Shinobi. Now, I didn't particularly like Shinobi. I didn't really want him here. I preferred Winds of Change. But comparing these to each other, I think Shinobi gives you a more tangible, measurable impact and effect. I think he's worth victory points. And I think he's the better card. I think you're always playing against the unknown. In Mark of Sleep, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know actually what someone's got in their hand. And I think Shinobi's the better card.
Couldn't agree more. Next.
I mean, I agree. I agree, to be honest, because even at 3 players, 2 players is where these are both strongest, okay? Because you can completely ignore a base in 2-player and then just Shinobi down for second place points. But it's the same for Mark of Sleep. You can just target 1 player, but then 3 players is where Shinobi gets infinitely stronger than Mark of Sleep, and then 4 players, Shinobi's a little bit weaker, but Mark of Sleep is much weaker in a 4-player game. So I think for me, I agree at Shinobi just for the victory points. Easy round.
Yeah, that's. I think that's speaking volumes for later, perhaps.
Well, here we go then. Another big daddy.
We've got a big boy now, haven't we?
So bring this to the front. There we go.
Oh.
Who wants to kick us off on this then? Lee?
Terraforming.
Are you agreeing with Terraform?
Microbot Alpha.
Oh, you're going to go Microbot. Okay. Why'd you say that?
Well, I think it's maybe one of my favourite minions in the whole game. I like that it beat out the king, so it's already got a lot going for it. It is in the same vein as a Full Sail, when we were talking about it before, a card that you whip out at the very end to power up absolutely everything in one go, and you can break 2 bases with it if you play it right. Terraforming is great. There is absolutely no argument against terraforming, and I think for that reason, that's why I don't think it should win. It's arguably too good on its own accord, and like you said earlier on, if we're playing base decks only and we're playing base cards only from the original deck, there are possibilities where you can't terraform the base away for anything worse than what's already going on. At the very worst, what you do here, discard all actions affected to it. Shuffle the base deck. You don't remove all the minions. So if you can't put down a base that is worse, what you end up putting down is a base that is, at the very worst, the same. It means it's still going to break. It means the person that was winning it's still going to win it. It doesn't really affect the actual change of what's going on there. All you can do is change the number of victory points that someone's going to get. You can maybe take a victory point off someone. And to me, that's nowhere near as powerful as giving yourself a victory point. And that's where I think Microbot Alpha has the advantage. Because when you play a Microbot Alpha down, unless you're Dave, sorry Dave if you're watching this, when you play a Microbot Alpha down, you are 100% playing it to win at least 1 base and power yourself up for probably 2 in a big turn, in a big swing. This is part of when I was talking about ghosts and zombies right at the start, the whole favourite factions thing and how it all kind of fits together. Microbot Alpha for me is one of my favourite cards because when you play that down, it makes a massive difference to your game. Terraforming, yes, it changes the board. Yes, it potentially means that base disappears, but it doesn't get rid of the minions, and it doesn't mean that your game is affected much, necessarily. And that's why, to me, Microbot Alpha is a more powerful card.
I really think that terraforming, you have so much control over what's going to happen that you choose when to play it, you pick the right moment, and you make the most devastating impact on the game that you can do. And that might be stopping your opponent winning points. It might be you win massive points. It might be that there's a huge swing. You can change it for a base to make it completely unplayable, therefore nullifying the last three minions they played in some cases. That's taking turns off people. If you change to a base that all of a sudden he's not worth it, he's not going to win them anything for those minion plays. They've wasted all those resources to get nothing out of it, or to get very little out of it. That is such a massive play. Sure, you need the base decks to be, you need the bases to have that card to do that, and the turn takes a while because you've got all these options, but you've got so many options. If they've devoted loads of resources to a base, you can just nullify them in one swoop, and that can just turn the game totally back around. It can, if you've got no minions out, they've got loads of minions out, all of a sudden they break the base, they get very little for it, everything goes, it's all gone, you're back to where you were. Or you are close to winning a base, you flip it to one that breaks, you win the base, you win the points, you can win the game, and you can have an extra minion on it as well. So I love Microbot Alpha. I think he's great. He does his burst play and then he's gone. And I think his burst play can only win you those base points for 5 versus 3, 2 as second place. I think that jump isn't as wide as the jump between what you can do with terraforming.
I think just pitching in on both points here. I mean, obviously they're both cards that you kind of sit on and wait for the right moment to play them. They're both finishes in a sense, in that you play Microbot Alpha to break a base, you play terraforming to switch a base, which will then break. So they're both base breaking cards. Terraforming is only really as good as the number of, or as, the bases that you're playing with. It's only as good as the base deck, basically. So if you're playing with more factions or more expansions, the base deck is bigger and terraforming gets better. Whereas if you're playing with fewer, terraforming is obviously worse because you've got fewer options. However, the ability of terraforming, Luke mentioned it there, Microbot Alpha, it only scores you victory points, whereas terraforming can swing victory points. So you can potentially minus some from someone else and give you some, which is a bigger swing potentially than what Microbot Alpha can give you. And I think that's where the power of terraforming comes in. As good as I think Microbot Alpha is, I think terraforming would have to take it for me. And terraforming has the other flip side in that if you're playing against very certain factions, Kaiju, Ancient Incas, Truckers, anything like that, it's more devastating as well in that you can destroy factions that rely on playing actions on bases. It's even more devastating against them. Now it's not that many, but it's another kind of positive in the terraforming box, basically. It's tricky one, this one, because Microbot Alpha is so undeniably strong. However, terraforming is just as strong as well, and if you're playing with more expansions, it's even better. So I think reluctantly I'd have to give it to terraforming on this, but it's not as clear maybe as it might have seemed.
Yeah, I think honestly, personally, rightly or wrongly, when we play with all of the base decks. We probably should limit that really moving forwards. Maybe just shuffle 10 out or something to play with that. Whether that's actually how it's supposed to be played or not, I don't know. We've never really gone all the way. Well, actually, we have gone very much in depth in the rulebook. But in terms of terraforming versus Microbot Alpha, to me, Microbot Alpha is the overtly powerful one out of the two. Terraforming is more subtly powerful, and it's equally as powerful, and there's no argument to be had around that. But to me, it's more subtly powerful, and I think it relies on more of a setup. You have to have the right base. You have to try to choke somebody at the right time. If you're playing on loads of different bases, which robots tend to do, then there is no one base you can break or one base that you can change, which would affect such a big swing as is being described. And I can't believe that you're saying it's only a victory point. Its first play only wins you a victory point. Yeah, it does. It only wins you up to 5 victory points. If we're just talking about splitting hairs, terraforming might give both people victory points, and that isn't anywhere near as good as only winning 5 myself. So I can accept both arguments, and I could see terraforming going through, and I wouldn't really have a problem with that. But personally, card for card, the one you want in your hand is Microbot Alpha, or I do anyway.
Having said that, I think Microbot Alpha is very reliant on being within the robots faction. I think it's relying on
being. It is a robot.
Yeah, but if you took either of these out of their own decks and put them in another deck, terraforming is still as strong as it is within the aliens, and Microbot Alpha loses a lot.
Yeah, but you can't make that argument because you're saying that terraforming is better as a singular card, right? But it's only powerful if it's got lots of other cards it's good with, regardless of what set it's in. You can only use terraforming successfully if you've got a good base to play it on, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what faction it's in, because what you're doing is eliminating all the other cards and then saying, yeah, terraforming's better, but it's not, because you've already eliminated all the other cards. If you only have those 2 cards in the deck, which is the best card?
Terraforming.
It's one of those.
Well, but you're always going to have base. You've got to include base. You've essentially got 41 cards in your deck. You've got your 2 factions, and you get to play 1 base deck of your choice at any point, and that is like selecting an extra card.
It's one of those ones. It's almost it's a casualty to how you play the base deck. I mean, you mentioned it there. The official rule is that you play with the bases. So if you pick a card from Awesome Level 9000, pick a faction from Awesome Level 9000, you play with all the Awesome Level 9000 bases. But some people I know play the game differently. They'll only use the bases for the factions they've chosen. So your base deck might only be 8 factions, 8 bases big, which would then mean terraforming would suck because half the bases would, 3 bases would be out, and you've only got 5 bases in the base deck. So it's almost a casualty to how you play the game. But I think you've got to judge it based on playing with the proper rules, which is playing with all the bases from all the expansions which you've picked. So the base deck is going to be quite big unless you've just picked all factions from one set. You're going to have a reasonable number of bases.
Even if you just play base, and you've still got the ninja bases within there, and like you said, it was in the Reef or the Treasure Island, whichever is the other base. That's the 2/0/0 base. So, yeah, I mean, you're not necessarily wrong, and I'm fighting the lost cause, and I knew I was fighting the lost cause going into it. But for me, 1 for 1, the card I would prefer out of the 2 of them would be Microbot Alpha. But I could completely understand why you would choose terraforming.
It is hard. It's hard not to agree with that because, I mean, we talked about Invader gaining a victory point. I mean, Microbot Alpha is a very similar sort of thing, isn't it? A Microbot Alpha could have written on it, gain 4 victory points, and it'd be, we'd be winning this. It'd be winning this thing entirely.
And that's the thing. We put Invader through over Archmage, despite the fact that Archmage is arguably a better card because it wins you more victory points. Microbot Alpha wins you more victory points.
I don't think it does because you're not necessarily. You might win. Let's say you've got a 4-2-1 base. Your opponent's still coming second. They're gaining 2 victory points. You use terraforming. You can change it to. If you look at something like Winter Squashed, you can be second and have that massive swing. So you could stop if you change a 4-2-1 base out that they were winning on to something like Winter Squashed. All of a sudden, you're flipping it more victory points than they would gain.
It's a 4 victory points win.
And what's Winter Squash? Is it a 1-4-1?
2-4-1.
2-4-1. So it's the same number of victory points then in that example.
No, so they're losing 2 and you gain 2.
Yeah, 2 for you, 2 lost for them, so it's 4 overall.
Yeah.
But then the thing with that though is it's dependent on you playing with one of the cease and desist factions.
Yeah, that's just an example. That's basically.
But that in that example, it has to be very specific for it to work, doesn't it?
Well, that was just one off the top of my head. There will be many others.
Yeah, I don't think there's as many as you might think. Yeah, there's a few bases like that, and I accept that pretty much every base faction has a base in there that is swung that way around, and I'm not arguing against that. But I think there's more chance of you winning more with a Microbot Alpha than there is with a Terraforming. Terraforming for me is, oh shit, I'm losing. I need to play a card to hopefully win. Microbot Alpha to me is, I'm going to dominate you with this massive Microbot that I'm going to stick up your jackstick. So
it's one of those ones, isn't it? Microbot Alpha is the proactive, I want to win the game card, whereas Terraforming is the reactive. Well, Terraforming can be proactive, but it's a bit of both. It gives you the option to do both. I mean, I think have we agreed on Terraforming? No.
I won't change mine. Microbot Alpha is my answer, but I'm happy for you to.
Yeah, I agree with your arguments, but I can't dispute the power of Terraforming, unfortunately.
Interesting. Ganging up on me again, boys.
Just like when we play Smash Up.
Just like when we play Smash Up.
Right. Leprechaun or the Invader? I mean, I think you know where I stand on this. There's only one clear winner here, in my opinion. It's got to be the Invader.
And it's
same reasons against Archmage. No, it's never Leprechaun. Never Leprechaun. Leprechaun's he's had a good run, but this is as far as Leprechaun goes, I think.
You think?
Absolutely.
So I look at this in two ways. Sorry, Luke, I'll shut up in a minute and you can have a go. I look at this in two ways. When I look at the face value of both of these cards, to me, the Invader's power is gaining 1 victory point. You play that down the base where the Leprechaun is, and it's dead. It's gone. Yes, it got you a victory point, but you don't have any power down. You don't have any ability to do anything with it. Or unless you're playing faction, graveyard faction, you are essentially not using that card again. Whereas the Leprechaun allows you to control a base and allows you to build up whatever power it is that you want to within that base, whilst preventing anybody from essentially playing on that base because of its natural ability. Outside of that, you look at the faction strength. The Invader has the ability to be picked up and protected like some sort of precious China doll, whereas the Leprechaun is a big bruiser. And to me, I'll go big bruiser all day, every day. So I am a bigger fan of the Leprechaun than I am the Invader. But I'm also pretty prejudiced against the aliens. So I'm happy to be talked around. To me, the Leprechaun is more interesting than the Invader. So I would prefer to put the Leprechaun through. But at some point, I have to just question whether or not I'm arguing the opposite just because it's fun to argue the opposite.
This is the best card in the core set, though, remember. So we've got to try and take the any prejudices out of this as well from previous games and things like that. So it's just got to be as objective as we can, taking any of the kind of dislikes or likes out of it as far as we can, I suppose, and just try and keep it to its power level, the card.
We've used a few arguments throughout the course of the evening, and I'm going to go back
arguments.
to say again. Yeah,
you contradictory arguments.
Contradict ourselves. We're all over the place. Really. We're so lost in argument and thought now. Actually, I can't remember which way is up anymore. But in terms of an argument that I am going to go back to, these two cards versus one another, the Leprechaun wins because you can't play the Invader on the same basis as the Leprechaun and still have the Invader to play later. So that's why, to me, the Leprechaun is a better card.
Although just on that, you're not really playing the Invader for the power, though. You're playing it purely for that ability. So it doesn't really matter if you play it on the same basis as Leprechaun. It's purely for the ability is why you're playing it.
Well, yes, but head to head is what we said. So head to head is what I'm saying here.
And you mentioned the wider context before as well. Leprechaun being the bruiser, but you can play one of the aliens cards just to pick up the Leprechaun before playing the Invader down. So you can just easily, in the context of that wider faction, you can easily just remove the Leprechaun before playing the Invader down.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily. I mean, it's more about the power of these two cards, particularly, but that is a thing that you can do.
Go on, Luke.
So for me, the Leprechaun is difficult to play. The Invader is simple. It's put the card down, get the victory point, try and pick it back up, try and protect it in whatever way you can, get it back, reuse it. The Leprechaun, you have to know who you're playing and how they're going to play. You play the Leprechaun, people aren't going to just willingly sacrifice minion after minion, just letting it die on its base.
Unless you play Dave.
Yeah. So you have to put that card down when it's a situation where you want to stop someone playing on a base. And in a game of Smash Up where you're trying to collectively break the base with the help of others, but be the winner on that base, that is a very difficult balance to make. So for me, the Leprechaun ends up with two purposes: stopping people playing on a base that is favorable for you to play on, the bases that give you victory points if you destroy stuff, or something that's giving you an advantage over someone else beyond breaking it for the victory points. If something is giving you victory points for playing on it or destroying stuff on it, I think there's a zombie one, and one of the tricksters ones, one where you destroy it, you get victory points. If you can let that base down, yeah. Or the robot one where you get victory points for every extra power 5 you have there. If you can manipulate the base ability, Leprechaun is very strong for that. But it's such a unique situation. All Leprechaun becomes is a bit of a blocker. So the other opportunity to use it is when the base is already halfway there, you block people playing on it and you can just tip it over the edge. But you have to then contribute your power to tipping it over the edge. His power of 5 is almost a bit irrelevant because he's not really going to try and use him to break the base. So it just is there to be the measuring pole to destroy other things. So for me, the complicatedness of the Leprechaun, the unique situations you have to use it in, it does create some nice plays, but the Invader is the better card because it's simple, it's easy to use, it gives you the same thing the Leprechaun does, Cave of Shinies, trying to protect that base to churn the victory points, but it gives you the victory point without touching anything in the base, without doing anything in the base, without playing your, it leaves your power 5 minion open for something good. So the Invader's the better card for me.
Yeah, I think you.
So just to check, you went for the easy power minion rather than the complicated base play. Just to refresh my brain on a previous argument that we've had recently.
So the Leprechaun, the way to get the benefit of the Leprechaun, other than to just stop people playing on a base, is to stop people playing on a base that you want to play on your own.
So what you're saying is that the Invader's the minion equivalent of Microbot Alpha, and the Leprechaun is the minion equivalent of terraforming. That's what you're saying?
No.
No. You sure?
Because later on I'm going to tell you
sure?
That I like terraforming again.
I mean, I agree with what Luke's saying there. I mean, the sheer simplicity of Invader, you just play it and you gain a victory point. It's not a complicated card. You can play it whenever you want. Whereas Leprechaun, obviously, tactically playing it on a base.
Man. But, I've got so much whiplash from the complicated discussion we just had previously to the really easy in-your-face power minion that we've just had here. I think Leprechaun is the more interesting of the two cards.
He's definitely more interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It's the more interesting card. I just don't think it's the better card.
Invader's probably the better card. I think for me, it's very hard for me to not come back to the argument that you can play one card and get one victory point, and at the end of the day, that's what Invader's strength is. So I think it's kind of got to be Invader. But by that logic, the whole exercise that we have done is fairly pointless because one victory point for one card is going to win basically every time, in my opinion.
Well, let's find out in 3 more rounds.
If an Aliens card wins this, I'm not coming back on this show.
I mean, that's the complexity of trying to work out what the best is in Smash Up, though, isn't it? I mean, that's why it's so tricky. Is that we're not just thinking about a straight up the card in isolation, as we've mentioned with Full Sail and First Mate and things like that. It's about considering the wider context of the game. And as I mentioned in the first round, Invader is a card that you build around. So you pick the aliens and you pick a support faction for the aliens. Basically, you're not picking another standalone faction, although you could, because the aliens with the invaders are that strong. But you are thinking about a pairing that can really maximize the invader. Whereas with Tricksters, it's very different because Leprechaun, you can you can buff the power of Leprechaun to make it a complete base blocker. But as Luke was saying there, I mean the Tricksters aren't great at, if they're trying to break the base solo, adding more power solo, because the minions aren't particularly brilliant. So they end up spending a lot of resources. If you're using Leprechaun to break a base, you spend a lot of resources to do that. Whereas I think it's better as the blocker. But then as the blocker, what do you really achieve doing that, I suppose? Especially, I think another thing we haven't talked about here is think about 3 players and 4 players as well. So Invader's good at all counts, but Leprechaun, as you get more bases, so when you get 5 bases in a 4-player game, blocking one of them is nowhere near as good as blocking one of the 3 bases in a 2-player game, whereas Invader doesn't suffer from an increase in the player count. Invader's just always good at every player count. As that could
I agree.
Yeah, I can't disagree. It's the better of the 2 cards. I would just really quite like to not have an aliens card go through, but it's the better of the 2 cards.
Is this where we make the play for King Rex coming through?
Back from the dead.
I mean,
interestingly, we're guaranteed 1 aliens in the final.
Well, that's it.
I'll tell you what, though. Give me a Zombie Lord over any of those 2 any day.
You think?
just while you're talking about King Minions, I know we've just had a sort of 2 King Minions head to head there. And I appreciate that the Invader's not the aliens King Minion, but I know the Leprechaun is obviously the Trickster's King Minion, as is the Ninja Master from the Ninjas. I give me the Zombie Lord over either of those 2 any day, and I would take the Zombie Lord over the Invader because of, again, the additional power that you get to put down on lots of bases, the spread that you get from that kind of minion. So there's just an aside, just while we're talking about things.
For me, I don't think the spread, it's a nice play to make, but chucking an extra 2 on every base doesn't necessarily, particularly in a 4-player game where you tend to just hone in on a base, break it, hone in on a base and break it.
And I would caveat that by saying we've just allowed a card go through there because, as Mark said, and rightly so, you build around that card. So you build around the Zombie Lord's abilities by pairing it with a faction that works excessively well by having those low power minions that you can pull out, that you can power up, that you can do stuff with. So by having loads of, ghosts, Go Zombies Ghosts is a great pairing that I play whenever I get an opportunity to do so. You get to bring out those cards from the graveyard that you get to play extras on, or you get to play the 5 power minion from the graveyard in extra plays, and you get to play the Zombie Lord pairs really nicely with those abilities. And I think that's a faction that you can pair around, that you can literally build around, and I think that's what makes the Zombie Lord so much more powerful than a 1 victory point Invader. But I accept that you build around the Invader as well. It was just an aside. It was a different point.
Just a bonus head to head.
We'll add what we'll do is we'll add another line coming off here and just put Zombie Lord to play against the champion.
Zombie Lord can play against King Rex in the plate final.
The ball's off.
The shield.
Right, so we're in the quarterfinals now. Oh, the semi-finals actually. Sorry, semi-finals. So we've got Full Sail up against Shinobi.
It's not a difficult. It's really not a difficult question.
This feels like Shinobi shouldn't have got this far. He's done all right. He's got out of the group stages. No one expected him to be here, and it's time for him to get knocked out.
It's like England at the World Cup.
Yeah, we've made
GTFO, Shinobi.
Yeah,
this is Carney in the playoffs. That's what this is.
It's time for him to get sailed away now.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't disagree. It has to be Full Sail for me.
Yeah.
As good as
hang on.
Shinobi is.
Well, we're not saying that Shinobi's better. We were saying Shinobi's better, right? That's what we were saying.
Well, Full Sail is the more complicated card, whereas Shinobi is a simple drop and play, so it's going to be Shinobi.
Is this where I need to show you guys I've got a little allegiance to the old pirates in this scenario?
I just thought you needed to wash your shirt.
Full Sail. Done. Next.
Easy.
Yeah.
That's the easiest discussion we've had all night.
For all-
Shinobi should not have been this far.
For all the reasons we've previously mentioned, Shinobi had a good run. I actually think Shinobi would lose the third, fourth place playoff against either of these two anyway. So
we
we'll
should
just
do
say
a
it's
third,
fourth.
fourth place.
Well,
We
that's
should do a third,
Shinobi's,
fourth place.
Shinobi's fourth. I mean, we've done that as well.
Yeah, that's
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
lock that in.
So here we have probably the hardest decision, I'm going to say, because First Mate and Full Sail was a pretty difficult one, and Microbot Alpha and Terraform was also pretty difficult. But I think this is probably going to be the hardest decision we've got to make here. Terraform
See, I don't think
or
it is.
Invader.
I don't think it is.
What do you think it should be?
Well, I think it's Invader hands down.
Okay.
Because you plan around the Invader. The Invader is what you build your deck around. You instantly gain 1 victory point, you pick it up and you go again. And you don't play that card unless you've got the pairing that you need to be able to play that card. Terraforming, yes, you pull it out at the end, but I didn't want it to get this far, and I don't think it deserves to have got this far. Invader is the better of these two cards. The Invader's the one that deserves to have got this far, realistically.
I think I would agree. And if you picked the aliens, why have you picked the aliens? Have you picked the aliens because of the Invader, or have you picked the aliens because of terraforming in the deck? And I think the answer to that question is always because of Invader.
Yeah, but in the same way, I think you always pick the Pirates for First Mates, but Full Sail is the play in there that is big.
Oh, that's fair enough. That is fair enough, actually.
I think Terraforming is to Full Sail, and Invader and the First Mates. They're the two comparables. First Mate against Invader would be tough, and Full Sail against Terraforming would be tough because they both have the function that the First Mate and the Invaders are the focus. What can I do with those? Terraforming and Full Sail are your other two big play actions that you want to get out for that huge swing play. Two big swing play cards. And for me, while I love the Invader and I love going, right, how can I pick him up and put him down as many times as I can? Terraforming is still the better card because of that one swing play turn. The big flip between going from losing a base to winning a base, going from your opponent just losing all the cards, all the different options you can do, plus the extra minion play. The swing play for Terraforming is so big in isolation versus playing working on the assumption the Invader goes down, you get your 1 victory point, you add your 3 power, that's about it. Terraforming is the better card. When you can pick the Invader back up, it just wins you the game. It's pretty straightforward. But Terraforming can also win you the game.
I think this is
for me, Terraforming is better.
This is a really tricky one because I think if you look at it on flexibility and outcome, Invader wins every time because Invader can be played at any turn in the game. Terraforming can't. Terraforming is typically played at one very specific turn later on in the game. And then outcome, Invader is a guaranteed certain outcome of one VP, whereas we talked before about Terraforming, the uncertainty of the base deck, what bases have been drawn. You play in Terraforming later in the game when you might have gone through a few more bases, so it's very dependent. The outcome is very dependent on the base deck, whereas Invader it's very much more flexible, much more certain outcome. And in the wider context, the faction, obviously, you've got 2 Invaders. Yes, the turn you play Invader is not a massive swing turn, but if you look back over the course of the game, and you've got 9 VP over the course of the game from the Invader, and you've only broken 1 base, and you've come a couple of seconds or something like that, and you've ended up winning the game, well, actually, the swing turn is the 9 VP from your Invaders, and that's lots of mini swing turns. It's a swing game, basically. I mean, it's really tricky because I completely agree. I think Terraforming is an amazing card. It's such a strong card, such a swingy card, but Invader just ticks too many boxes for me on this one. I think it's much more flexible, much more certain outcome.
For me, the Terraforming, I think, was beaten by the Microbot Alpha. So The question for me in my head is, would I put Alpha against Invader, and which one would I prefer? And I think I'd prefer Invader over Alpha. So even if Alpha had got this far and I thought Alpha was a better card, then for me, Invader has to win, because Invader is a better card than Microbot Alpha, just on face value. And I think Mark's just conceptualized it exactly how I would have liked to myself. You get more victory points from the Invader than the swing that you would get from a Terraform. Yes, Terraform is that big play. Yes, it's that drama at the end of the game when someone thinks they're winning, you pull out a reef or whatever and make them F themselves by doing whichever way around it is that they're going to lose, and you're going to maybe swing it so that you get the extra victory point. But you've been getting extra victory points throughout the game every time you play the Invader, and you don't plan to play Terraforming. You have to play it when you need to play it, whereas Invader, you plan to play. You don't just put it down as a 3-power minion just because you want to play a minion. You put it down when you know you can pick it back up. You don't chuck it off to the wolves.
I mean,
so to me, Invader's a better card.
It depends on the matchup as well, because if you know your opponent doesn't have any way of getting rid of the Invader, you can just play it down,
exactly.
Wait a turn, and then pick it back up. You don't have to immediately. Most of the time, you will pick it back up, but there are matchups where you're pretty safe in just putting it down and leaving it for at least a turn.
But for me, because you have to play and pick up Invaders, I think you guys are slightly unfairly going down the route of you get to play him over and over and over and over and get his reward. If you were to play Terraforming multiple times in the game, you are getting big swing turns every single time you play it. Now, you're working on the assumption that it goes to the discard pile and don't come back out. But if you have a faction that gets stuff out of the discard pile, like zombies, multiple Terraformings is more damaging than multiple Invaders. Sure, you're getting victory points, but Terraforming not only gives you victory points, it prevents your opponents from getting victory points, and you're playing 2 minions a turn, and you're choosing which bases you want. I think because the assumption with Invader is you pick it up, you put it down, you pick it up, and you do that over and over again. If you were to do a similar thing with Terraforming, playing it over and over again, the effects would be just as devastating.
Yeah, but one of the arguments you made earlier on, how many Invaders are there in an Aliens deck? 2?
2.
So which would you rather, 2 Invaders or 1 Terraforming?
1 Terraforming.
Well, I think you're wrong. There you go. I guess that's why we're arguing.
I think it's really tricky because I think Zombie Aliens is probably the strongest pairing in Smash Up, in my opinion, because they can play both of these cards multiple times. However, when playing Zombie Aliens, I generally do play the Invader more, because actually, if you think about this, whenever you pick Aliens, you've got like a side mission, basically a side quest. Play the Invader 15 times, win the game. That's basically your kind of side quest. However far you get into that basically means you have to do less in terms of base breaking and adding power in other ways. So if you can do 15 plays of it, which you can very easily do with Alien Zombies, that is a quicker route than playing Terraforming multiple times to break bases. And you've got to think about it as well. As soon as you played your first Terraforming, the most ideal base might have gone. The second time you play Terraforming, okay, Jungle Oasis has gone this time. So Jungle Oasis went the first time you played Terraforming. There's now no Jungle Oasis left. So the second time you play Terraforming, if you need a situation where second place isn't going to get any victory points, where you don't have that situation anymore because Jungle Oasis has already gone. The third time you play Terraforming, there might not be any decent targets left. So the number of targets gradually gets worse and worse as well the more times you play Terraforming.
Yeah. It's diminishing returns, isn't it? Whereas Invaders...
Exactly, yeah.
And that, again, that to me is why Invader's a stronger card.
I think it's 2 for 1 here, Luke.
I'm very upset to be losing not only this vote but the first mate vote.
Don't worry, we'll
I think Terraforming going is a mistake.
To be honest, it could have been either. You know, they're both very, very strong cards. But
honestly, I think getting this far was a mistake. So I agree. It shouldn't have gone now. It should have gone the last round.
Are we going to formalise?
It should be either an Invader versus First Mate final, or it should be a Full Sail versus Terraforming final. That would be the justice here. That's the Brazil versus Argentina, or
to me, it doesn't matter at all. Either of those, Aliens wins. Aliens beats Pirates. hands down.
Are we going to formalise the third, fourth place playoff here and say that Terraforming absolutely annihilates Shinobi?
He can't even sneak his way out of that one.
Honestly, I think if you did a second and third place playoff, Terraforming and Annihilate Full Sail. So I think the two best cards in the deck belong to the Aliens faction.
It's interesting because I was thinking about putting Crop Circle in, which is obviously another Aliens card, because Crop Circle is probably better than 3 or 4 of the cards that have already been mentioned. Mm-hmm. However, Crop Circle being the third best alien card was never going to win, so I was just like, well, what's the point in including that? And it probably would have been added at the expense of Rampage anyway, so it's just better to have, I think, 2 of each one. But I think Crop Circle
very good. That is also a devastating card that you never want to see as an opponent to that card.
And
all this has highlighted to me is that I need to play the Aliens more than I do.
Aliens, Pirates, all the time.
And Time Travelers. Aliens, Time Travelers.
Well, Crop Circle is one of those cards as well that it's devastating for your opponent. It's like Terraforming. It's really bad for your opponents, but it can be really good for you as well, in that if you've got an Invader down, you can pick it back up with Crop Circle and then play it again for another VP. So it's kind of a dual benefit card for the Aliens. So here we have the final then.
What a fair final it is, might I say.
I think it's well deserved, in fairness. I think these two are very, very strong cards. I think we've ended up with a pretty reasonable call here. Who wants to?
To me, it's an easy decision. I said it from the off. Honestly, any card that gives you a free victory point is so ridiculously powerful. And to me, they both are only played with set conditions. You only really play the Invader if you know you can pick it back up to safety, or you know it can't be destroyed, etc., etc. Full Sail is only played when you know it's going to win you a significant proportion of victory points on a base. It might win you more in one big turn, but it only gives you that one turn swing. Invader, consistently, multiple victory points. It's the best card.
I agree.
I also agree as well. I think it's pretty clear. I think with Full Sail, one thing we haven't really mentioned with Full Sail as well is that if you can have this kind of greed factor to it as well, in that you're always holding it for the best moment, whereas actually the best moment might have already been and gone and you not realised it. It's got this kind of greed factor to it where you want to try and maximise it as much as possible, but then actually...
I agree. Tenacious C is better than Full Sail. We should have put
let's bring it through.
I think if this was First Mate against the Invader or Terraforming against Invader again, which we've already had, it would have been a tougher discussion. But actually, Invader against Full Sail, Invader is the better card.
As good as Full Sail is, I just don't think there's much of a comparison here.
Yeah.
Do you really think that First Mate would have been more of a discussion for Invader?
For me, it would.
Would you have still chosen Invader?
No.
Interesting.
It's tricky because
you really are. You really are in love with the Pirates.
Terraforming and First Mate are probably my 2 favourite cards in the game. Invader is very, very strong.
Oh, but we're not picking favourite cards, because if we're picking favourite cards, then my favourite card isn't in this selection of cards.
Okay, favourite because I think they're the best.
If we're picking favourite,
King Rex is the real champion right there. The people's champion.
The people's champion. Seriously, if we're picking favourite cards, then this is a completely different discussion, because the Aliens wouldn't have factored into it at all. I absolutely despise the Alien faction. Never play the Alien faction given the choice. So
is that because it's just too good though?
They're my favourite card because of how good they are, not because.
But we've just proven that the First Mate isn't that good, because it can actually be quite easily destroyed. And
well, you guys decided it wasn't that good. I didn't. I decided it was one of the best cards in the game, and it should have been in the final.
It was one of the best cards in the game. Look, it got further than Tenacious Z did.
It got further than all of these cards.
But not as
These
far
are
as
pretty good.
Shinobi, though.
Not as far as Shinobi. Yeah, Shinobi is clearly a better
In
card.
a world where Shinobi gets to 4th place and First Mate doesn't get out of the round before.
For the record, Shinobi versus First Mate isn't a difficult discussion. It was it's First Mate.
Yeah.
I think if we look back on some of the other ones, Leprechaun is it doesn't really have a chance, but it's probably better than Shinobi, or maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe Shinobi.
Do you know the interesting thing about all of this? If you try and knock First Mate out, he stays on the board. So even if you knock him out in the semis, he stays in the game.
Well, shouldn't Tenacious Z be coming right through then for that?
Oh, where's Luke gone?
I don't know. We lost the. He's back.
Oh, there's Luke.
Lost your image.
Was that
for a
just you,
second.
Mike? Were you just mic dropping? Were you mic dropping and going?
Yeah, I'm out.
First Mate.
Ed.
Do we think there are any? Do you think there are any kind of surprises there, or did that kind of go as we thought it would?
When I saw the 2 aliens cards that you picked and put them on the board, I basically wrote down a couple of notes before we started and thought they're going to get through to the final. We're going to be discussing these. You could have pitched them head to head. Well, we did pitch them head to head in the end, didn't we? But we took it through to a final. That was a bit interesting. The First Mate Tenacious Z discussion was interesting, and I think the play style matters, and the more discussions we were having, the later it got into it, the more that our arguments kind of crossed over one another and changed based on what the cards were. And it's interesting because I do have prejudice against various different cards. So I'm looking at the Aliens faction. I don't want it to get further because I know it's so good, because I know it's impossible to argue against Terraforming or Invader. Really, Terraforming is number 2 for me. Full Sail comes a third behind Terraforming, behind Invader. The 2 best cards in the game are the Aliens factions, and even if you put Crop Circles in, I'd argue that it's maybe even better than Full Sail as well. Maybe the best 3 cards in the game are the best are the 3 cards that belong to the Aliens faction. So there was some interesting discussions that we had. I'm surprised that Microbot Alpha was beaten.
I'm surprised First Mate was beaten.
It was actually a tough decision, that Microbot Alpha Terraforming one. I didn't think it would be that difficult, but it was.
So I felt like I put together a strong argument.
It was a compelling case. I mean, I think what this highlights is how good some of the core set cards are. I mean, even to how many factions have been printed since, some of the core set ones are still some of the best cards in the game, hands down. I mean, it's really interesting. It's really interesting.
I think
sorry, go on.
I think if we repeat this exercise, which I hope that we do, and end up with a champion of champions, I think there's easily at least 4 cards from this core set that will be in the final rounds of all the cards ever made.
I'd recommend thinking about what you would, if you could make your own all-star faction, what you would have, because that's something I've done recently. And Tenacious Z, First Mate, Invader, Archmage, and Mark of Sleep all made my faction. That's 5 cards. A quarter of my faction came from the core set, and I would have had Terraforming, Full Sail, probably just those 2 if I could add more as well. So it's some of the core set is such a good set in terms of some of the. It's got some factions that are really weak as well. It's got some very weak cards in the core set. That's why it's got a real range.
Well, if you think about it spawned the rest of the game off. It has to have been strong, otherwise it would never have had the success that it had. So It has to be strong in terms of the base set, because otherwise it doesn't make you want to buy all the additional ones, does it? We've copies of the additional ones.
We mentioned it at the start, or Luke mentioned about the Pokemon trading card game, in that Pokemon will rotate, whereas Smash Up doesn't rotate. So the core set always has to be viable. So no matter how many factions they print and how many expansions they print, the core set still has to be playable. So the core set really sets the kind of framework in which everything else comes in. So however, it kind of sets the weakness to strongness range in which everything else really sits, which I think is really interesting because the game doesn't rotate. But it'd be really interesting to do like the weakest card in core set as well as strongest card. I think that'd be an interesting one to do. But I'd love to do. We mentioned this before we came on, but it'd be really good to do a strongest card in every expansion, and then do a champions tournament where all the strongest. We could maybe do 1 and 2, so like Invader and Full Sail would go through to the next round, and then we play them all off against each other. I think that'd be really.
It would be really, really nice if we could get all that done, and then when we're able to get back together again, we actually get to do that in person, face to face. That would be really quite good.
Yeah,
I'd enjoy that.
that would be good.
Actually play it. That'd be like play some sort of weird hybrid faction. Maybe we all get to make our own hybrid factions out of our own sets.
Well, yeah, use your set and make your own all-star faction, because that's what I've done, and
It's a good idea.
make the strongest possible singleton faction you can make, and we'll play all 3 of them off against each other, and we'll see who's got the strongest possible faction.
I need to order 20 more base sets then, so I've got 20 King Rexes to play.
No, 20 King Rexes and 20 Rampages or something. That would be your faction.
What I think has been really fun is looking at how different people value different things. Like it's again, I know I've known Luke for quite a long time now, so it's interesting to know how we both think. And he very much is a slow burner. Think he rather build something up to sort of destroy in one big sort of fell swoop, like the first mate, for example. You want to build up the power onto that first mate. You want to use the terraforming to allow that sort of that slow burning play to take effect when you want it to. Where I'm much more in your face, aggressive play style, and it's really interesting to compare both of those sets, particularly when we're talking about cards and the ones that we favour. It was nice to actually align on a few decisions for a change. It's not often we do that, so.
I think you like to win the game, and I like to win the game in dramatic fashion.
A notable win.
I think Mark likes to try and stop us both winning the game.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
No, that was really good to do. That I enjoyed that. So thank you very much, both of you, for committing your Monday evening and coming helping me do this video. And as I say, I think it'd be really good to do every expansion and then do like an overall winners tournament. And we'll see Invader win that one as well, probably.
Never. I will not let the Invader win any more things. There are no more aliens winning anything.